Hey everyone! If you love stories that hit deep and keep you hooked, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life tales like Emily's journey. Smash that like button if you're feeling inspired, and drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts and stories too. Let's build this community together. Ready? Let's dive in. Emily Carter stared at the sink, where lukewarm water clung to a mountain of dirty dishes. The scent of leftover curry clung to the air, mixing with the faint odor of cigarette smoke that always seemed to follow Derek home from work. The July sun filtered through the blinds, casting narrow stripes of light on the kitchen floor, but nothing about that moment felt bright. You seriously forgot the insurance payment again? Derek's voice came from the living room. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. I didn't forget, Emily replied, still drying her hands. I wasn't sure which card we were using this month. He appeared in the doorway, shirt off, still in his jeans, holding a beer bottle like it was part of his anatomy. We've talked about this. Jesus. Emily. You've got one job, just one, and you can't even handle that. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. He took a sip of beer, then said it. Not with anger. Not even with disappointment. Just emptiness. You're useless. The words didn't echo. They landed. Heavy. Final. Emily stood there for a long second. Then two. Her eyes didn't tear up. Not this time. Something inside her simply quieted. She moved without thinking. Walked past him, down the hallway, into the bedroom. The old duffel bag was still at the bottom of the closet. She pulled it out, stuffed in a few changes of clothes, her passport, and the folder with their savings. $12,360 in cash, stashed in an envelope behind a tax return. He'd insisted on keeping it in cash, in case banks collapsed or whatever. She never questioned it. The car keys were on the dresser. Her name was on the title. She paid for it before they met. She moved fast, like someone evacuating before they had time to panic. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't leave a note. She just walked out. The Texas heat hit her like a slap when she stepped outside. The old Toyota's door creaked like always. She tossed the bag in the passenger seat and turned the ignition. It roared to life, reliable as ever. Her heart was thudding, but her hands didn't shake. Not yet. She pulled out of the driveway, past the gas station where they used to buy late-night ice cream, past the billboard that said, "Don't mess with Texas," and onto I-35 heading north. She didn't have a destination. She didn't need one. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't scared of the unknown. She was scared of staying. 50 miles out of Austin, she pulled into a rest stop, bought a bottle of water and a coffee from the vending machine, and sat under a shaded bench. Her phone buzzed. 10 missed calls. Derek. She blocked the number. That night, she slept in the car at a truck stop in Waco. It wasn't glamorous, but she felt something she hadn't in years. Space. Not just physical space, but space in her mind. She could hear herself think again. She didn't cry until the morning. Not because of Derek. Because she'd finally left. Emily woke with a crick in her neck and the taste of stale coffee in her mouth. Sunlight filtered through the windshield, streaked with dust and bug splatter, and somewhere nearby a diesel engine roared to life. The parking lot behind the Love's truck stop was already humming with movement. Truckers stretching their legs, travelers wiping condensation off windshields, a woman with 2 kids trying to get them into the bathroom before they exploded with energy. Emily sat up slowly, blinking against the sun. She'd fallen asleep in the driver's seat, the seatbelt digging into her ribs all night. Her back hurt. Her knee was stiff. She had $12,000 in a duffel bag and no idea what the hell she was doing. Still, she didn't regret it. She got out and stretched. Her t-shirt stuck to her back. The morning heat in central Texas was already creeping past 80 degrees, and it wasn't even 8 a.m. She went inside the truck stop, rinsed her face in the bathroom, brushed her teeth with the backup brush she kept in her purse, something she always thought was neurotic, now kind of brilliant, and bought a banana and a protein bar. She sat at a picnic table outside and took out her phone. No service. Or maybe it was blocked. She'd turned off her data last night to avoid checking anything. To avoid him. For a moment, she considered checking his Instagram, but stopped herself. If she was going to move forward, she couldn't be dragging his digital ghost behind her. She opened Google Maps. Her finger hovered. Where do you go when you've just walked out of your life? She tapped randomly. Oklahoma City. Not glamorous, not too far. Far enough. The drive. Highway 35 stretched long and empty ahead of her, a two-lane ribbon cutting through fields, gas stations, and fast food signs. Her thoughts drifted to her mom in El Paso. Not close, not really. They hadn't talked in months. Emily couldn't stand her mother's "I told you so" tone, even when unspoken. She turned on the radio. Static. Switched to Spotify. A playlist called Starting Over played softly through the speakers. She smiled despite herself. Corny. But it fit. A billboard outside Gainesville read, "Need a fresh start? Jesus is waiting." She shook her head and kept driving. By the time she hit Oklahoma City, she was hungry, tired, and unsure if she wanted to spend another night in the car. She parked near a public library and used their Wi-Fi from the lot. She found a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. $42 a night. No reviews, but close enough. The sign was half-lit and the paint peeled off the side of the building. She paid in cash and got a room that smelled like old air conditioning and cleaner that didn't quite do its job. She took the longest shower she'd had in weeks. The water wasn't hot, but it was steady, and she stayed under it until her fingers pruned. She stared at herself in the mirror after. Wet hair, tired eyes, a faint bruise under her collarbone from where Derek had grabbed her during their last real fight. Not a punch. He never hit her. But the bruises still showed up. In her skin. In her silence. She changed into clean clothes and pulled the curtains shut. Outside, the motel parking lot flickered under yellow lights. Inside, she curled up on the bed, holding her phone, staring at nothing. Then, a message. Unknown number. You think you're so brave? You're pathetic. Bring the car back before I report it stolen. Her chest tightened, but she didn't reply. She blocked the number without thinking. Her name was on the title. She had the papers in the glove box. Still, the message lingered. The fear was familiar. The urge to explain herself, to justify, it gnawed at her. But she didn't give in. That night, she wrote 3 things in a notebook she'd brought but hadn't touched in over a year. I am not useless. I am allowed to leave. I don't owe him anything. She stared at the words until her eyes burned. She was still scared. But now she had motion. That counted for something. The next morning, Emily checked out of the motel before 8 a.m. The man at the front desk didn't ask any questions. He didn't even look at her when she handed over the keycard. That suited her just fine. Outside, the sun was already up, the sky wide and pale. Oklahoma City was quiet at that hour. Too early for traffic, too late for silence. The air felt different here. Lighter somehow. Not better. Just anew. She pulled out of the lot, not quite sure where she was going next. She figured she'd head east for a bit. Maybe toward Arkansas. She'd never been. It seemed quiet. Trees. Mountains. Something peaceful. Half an hour down I-40, she saw a sign for Lake Eufaula and took the exit on impulse. The road narrowed as it wound through pine trees and patches of open land dotted with trailers, tiny diners, and rusted-out cars sitting on cinder blocks. It reminded her of childhood road trips, the kind where the air smelled like bug spray and gas station hot dogs, and her dad tried to pretend everything was fine. She hadn't thought about him in a long time. At the lake, she parked in a gravel lot beside a bait shop and wandered down a path toward the water. It was wide and calm, a silver mirror under the morning sky. The kind of place people came to fish or just sit in silence. There were a few campers, but no one really paid attention to her. She sat on a rock and let her shoes dangle in the water. Cold. Real. The kind of cold that reminded you you're alive. Her thoughts were a mess, looping around like the same bad dream. Derek's voice still echoed in her mind, twisting old words into new doubts. You'll never make it on your own. Who's gonna take care of you now? You think you're better than me? She closed her eyes. Breathed. Told herself, he's not here. This voice? That's just residue. She pulled out her notebook again. Wrote. I made it another night. I'm not going back. I need a plan. A chance encounter. Back in the parking lot, she noticed a small food truck setting up. Darla's Biscuit House. A middle-aged woman with a long braid and tie-dye apron was unloading boxes of flour and eggs from a minivan. "You new around here?" the woman asked, eyeing Emily without suspicion, just curiosity. Emily hesitated. "Sort of. Just passing through." "Well, everyone's passing through," Darla said with a shrug. "You hungry?" Emily nodded. "I don't have a lot of cash." "Don't worry about it. First biscuit's always free for the heartbroken." That stopped her. "Is it that obvious?" Darla smiled. "Only to those who've been there." She handed Emily a paper plate with a warm biscuit, buttery and flaky, topped with what tasted like homemade strawberry jam. For a few minutes, they ate in silence, sitting on folding chairs beside the truck. "Where you headed?" Darla asked casually. "I don't know. East maybe. Away." Darla nodded. "Sometimes away is good enough." They talked for a while, about road trips, old dogs, the weird way life throws you into motion when you're stuck too long. Darla didn't ask for details, and Emily didn't offer them. It was the first real conversation she'd had with a stranger in years that didn't feel like small talk or performance. Before she left, Darla handed her a coffee in a to-go cup and scribbled a number on the side. "If you're ever near Hot Springs, Arkansas, look me up. I've got friends who rent rooms cheap." No questions asked. Emily looked down at the cup, then back at her. "Thank you. Just keep driving," Darla said. "The road's longer than the fear." That night, Emily stopped in Fort Smith and rented a tiny Airbnb room behind a retired couple's house. It smelled like lavender and old wood. She wrote 2 more lines before bed. "I met someone kind today. I don't feel like a ghost anymore." The air in Fort Smith was humid, thick with the promise of summer rain. Emily lay on the twin bed in the tiny Airbnb, watching the ceiling fan spin with a soft, rhythmic clatter. The sounds of cicadas buzzed through the screen window, mingling with distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. She hadn't moved much since waking up. Her body was tired, but not in the usual way. It was the weight of stillness, the strange exhaustion that came after running, when there was finally no one chasing you. For the first time in days, she wasn't in a car. She didn't have to make a decision. There was nowhere to be in this moment but here. And that's when it hit her. She was completely alone. Not just physically. She'd been physically alone since she pulled out of that driveway in Austin. But emotionally, mentally, existentially. No Derek. No friends calling to check in. No boss wondering where she was. Her phone had stopped vibrating entirely. It felt like she'd stepped off the grid and no one noticed. She sat up slowly, the bed creaking beneath her. Her throat felt tight. She hadn't cried in a couple days. Not really. But this wasn't panic. This wasn't regret. This was grief. Grief for the years she'd lost pretending to be someone Derek could love. Grief for the girl she used to be before him. The one who wanted to open a bakery, who had playlists for long drives and painted her nails just because. Grief for the version of herself that believed she deserved all of it. The silences, the gaslighting, the apology sex that felt like a trade. She pulled the notebook from her duffel and wrote slowly. "I'm allowed to mourn what I escaped. Just because I left doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Healing doesn't erase the past." A call she didn't expect. Around noon, she finally turned her phone back on. No new messages. Just one voicemail, not from Derek, but from her sister, Anna. Anna lived in Seattle, married, 2 kids, and they hadn't spoken in over a year. Not because of a fight but because of drift. Distance. Life. Emily had pulled away during the worst of her relationship. She didn't want Anna asking questions she didn't have the strength to answer. She hesitated, then played the voicemail. "Hey it's me. I don't know if this number still works, but I saw something online. I think Derek posted about you leaving. Something cryptic and kind of gross, honestly. If you're okay, can you just let me know? I miss you. And I'm here, okay? No judgment. Just call me." Emily sat there, phone in hand, throat tight. She hadn't expected that. Not the concern. Not the gentleness. Not after all this time. She didn't call back. Not yet. But she saved the message. Played it twice. Then she opened a new note in her phone and wrote, "Maybe I'm not as alone as I think." A room in the mountains. 2 days later, Emily arrived in Hot Springs, Arkansas. She'd texted Darla, who put her in touch with a woman named Riini, a former nurse who rented out rooms above her antique shop. The building was old brick, draped in ivy, nestled at the edge of the Ouachita Mountains. Riini met her at the door with a warm smile and strong arms. She smelled like lemongrass and old books. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," Riini said, handing her a key. "But just so you know, we don't do ghosts here. If you stay, you gotta promise to live." Emily gave a small smile. "I'm trying." The room was simple. A twin bed, an armchair by the window, and a little writing desk. The view overlooked a forested trail that curved into the hills. Birds chirped constantly. At night, the sky was darker than she'd seen in years, full of stars instead of streetlights. The first evening, Riini invited her to a small bonfire behind the shop. A few other women were there. A bartender, a single mom, a woman in recovery. They laughed too loud. They passed around a bag of marshmallows. They didn't ask Emily what she'd left behind, only what she wanted next. She didn't have an answer. But when she went back to her room and wrote in her notebook that night, she filled 2 pages. And at the very bottom, one sentence stood out, written in a firmer hand than she expected. "I don't want to disappear anymore." Emily woke to the sound of rain tapping gently against the windowpane. A soft, steady rhythm. The kind that made you stay under the covers just a little longer, not out of sadness, but peace. Hot Springs felt different. The air smelled like pine needles and fresh earth. The town was quiet, nestled into the folds of the Ouachita Mountains, with streets that curved like thought lines, not designed for speed or escape. Just living. She had been staying in the room above Riini's antique shop for a week now. Long enough to feel a routine settle in. Morning coffee in the shared kitchen, long walks through the forest trail, the occasional helping hand around the store. Emily wasn't paying rent yet, but Riini hadn't brought it up. Instead, she'd left an apron hanging on a hook by the stairs, with a sticky note. "You don't have to work, but you can if you want to feel useful." The word useful stopped Emily cold. Derek had weaponized that word. She pulled the apron down anyway, sweeping dust and starting fresh. By noon, Emily was arranging vintage glassware in the front window, sunlight pouring in through the rippled glass. She liked the quiet of the shop, the smell of aged wood and old paper, the stories inside every object, even if no one ever came to hear them. A local man wandered in looking for a book on steam trains. A retired teacher bought a blue ceramic bowl because it reminded her of one her mother used. Emily wrapped it in newspaper and handed it over carefully, and for the first time in a long time, she felt that strange satisfaction that comes not from achieving anything grand, but from being part of something small and real. "You're good with people," Riini said that evening, over bowls of lentil soup. "Even when you don't talk much." Emily smiled. "I used to be better. Before." "Before what?" Emily paused. "Before I started letting someone else narrate my story." Riini nodded slowly. "Well, lucky for you, that guy got cut from the cast." The empty storefront. A few days later, while walking back from the post office, Emily noticed a for lease sign in the window of a tiny corner shop 2 blocks from the antique store. The building had cracked red bricks and a sagging awning, but it was beautiful in the way forgotten things often are. She stood at the window for a long time, peering inside. Empty shelves. Dusty floor. A counter that looked like it had once hosted something sweet. The idea came not as a thunderbolt, but a whisper. What if? She hadn't baked in years. Not seriously. Not since her 20s. Derek said it was a waste of time, something people with no ambition did to distract themselves. But before him, before all of it, she used to dream of opening a little bakery. Not some glossy Instagrammable cafe. Just a warm place with cinnamon rolls, fresh coffee, and maybe a chalkboard sign out front with a terrible pun. She took a picture of the phone number on the sign and walked away without calling. Not yet. But it stayed with her, like the smell of something baking in the back of your memory. That night, she baked banana bread in the antique shop's tiny kitchen. The oven barely held temperature, and the flour was a year expired, but it came out soft, with a golden crust. She left a slice on Riini's desk. In the morning, Riini found her at the counter and said, "You should be charging people for this." Emily laughed. It was just banana bread. So? Riini raised an eyebrow. You think just making people feel at home isn't worth anything? Emily looked down at her hands. The same hands that once shook while cleaning up broken plates after another fight. The same hands that packed a duffel bag in silence. Now they were steady, dusted with flour. She didn't feel whole. But she didn't feel broken either. Just becoming. That evening, she wrote. I'm allowed to build something again. Not because I need to prove anything, but because I want to. Maybe I could stay. At least long enough to try. The days in Hot Springs passed in a steady rhythm. Mornings with Rieni in the antique shop, afternoons exploring the trails, evenings scribbling in her notebook beneath the soft glow of a lamp. For a while, it felt like the weight of her old life was shrinking, becoming a shadow that grew smaller with each sunrise. But shadows don't disappear completely. One humid afternoon, Emily was closing the shop's front door when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Her heart sank. She stared at the screen, debating whether to answer or just block it outright. Reluctantly, she picked up. Emily. The voice was cold, sharp, unmistakably Derek. Why are you calling? She said, voice barely steady. I want the car back, he said. And the money. You think you can just walk away? I'm not coming back, Emily said, her voice stronger now. You don't get to decide that. You're stuck. Stuck. She laughed bitterly. I'm not stuck anymore. There was a pause. Then a sigh, almost tired. Look, I'm sorry. Maybe I was harsh. But you know what? I miss you. We can fix this. Emily felt tears sting, but she swallowed them down. No, she said firmly. This isn't fixable. Not by us. Before he could respond, she hung up. The weight of fear. The call left her rattled, the old fear creeping back like a slow poison. But alongside the fear was something new. Clarity. She was no longer the scared girl who took every insult as truth. She was the woman who baked bread and made friends and had a plan, however small and shaky. That night, she told Rieni about the call. Rieni listened without interruption, her face calm but serious. Abuse isn't just bruises, she said quietly. It's the way they make you question everything about yourself. Emily nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. I'm scared, she admitted. But I'm done being scared all the time. Rieni reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You don't have to be. Standing her ground. The next day, Emily went to the local police station and filed a report about Derek's harassment. The texts, the phone calls, the threats. It wasn't easy. The officer asked questions that felt invasive, like peeling back layers of shame and doubt. But she answered, piece by piece, telling her story with a voice that sometimes faltered but never broke. Afterwards, Emily walked outside into the afternoon sun, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Light because she was finally taking control. Heavy, because the fight wasn't over. That night, she wrote in her notebook. Fear visits, but it no longer rules me. I'm standing, even when it's hard. This is my life. My story. The early morning air smelled of damp earth and coffee brewing somewhere down the block. Emily tied her hair back, slipped on the apron Rieni had given her, and unlocked the door to the small corner shop she'd rented. The for lease sign had been taken down, replaced by a hand-painted chalkboard that read, Emily's Bakery. Opening soon. It still felt surreal. The empty shelves she'd once hesitated to touch now held bags of flour, sugar, and jars of homemade preserves. A second-hand oven, scraped and shining, sat ready in the corner. She'd spent weeks calling suppliers, borrowing money from a friend she'd met in Hot Springs, and researching licenses and permits. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building. Small victories. Her first batch of cinnamon rolls came out golden and steaming, their scent drifting into the street. A few neighbors wandered in, drawn by the smell. Emily greeted them with a shy but genuine smile, handing out samples. Just a little taste, she said, voice shaking slightly. A woman with 2 kids at her side took a bite and nodded. You're gonna do just fine, hon. For the first time in years, Emily felt something like hope. Fragile, yes, but real. Unseen struggles. But hope didn't erase the nights when loneliness crept in, thick and cold. When the silence of the empty shop pressed against her, and the fear of failure whispered that she'd never be enough. One evening, Rieni stopped by with a care package, a jar of honey, a hand-knit scarf, and a note. For when the nights get long. You're stronger than you think. Emily folded the scarf into her arms and whispered, "Thank you." That night, Emily wrote in her notebook, "Every day feels like climbing a mountain. But I'm still putting one foot in front of the other. This time, I'm climbing for me." The morning light filtered softly through the lace curtains of Emily's small apartment above the bakery. Outside, Hot Springs was waking up slowly, the streets quiet but promising. The scent of fresh bread and brewing coffee curled through the open windows, mingling with the scent of rain from the night before. Emily sat at her kitchen table, her notebook open but untouched. Her fingers traced the worn leather cover, her mind racing through everything that had brought her here. The pain, the fear, the endless nights of uncertainty. She had come a long way. Facing the past. Embracing the future. That week, the police had called to update her on Derek. He had been charged with harassment and was ordered to stay away. It wasn't a perfect ending. She knew the legal battles would linger, but it felt like a shield, a step toward reclaiming her life. Emily had reached out to Anna. They had talked for hours, tears and laughter weaving through the conversation. Anna promised to visit, to help however she could. For the first time in years, Emily felt the fragile thread of family reconnecting. And the bakery? It was no longer a dream folded away in the corners of her mind. It was a real breathing thing. Her own little space where she made cinnamon rolls, banana bread, and coffee that smelled like hope. Community and connection. The grand opening had been small but beautiful. Friends from Hot Springs, neighbors, and even Darla, who drove over from her biscuit truck with a bouquet of wildflowers, showed up. They laughed, shared stories, and ate until their smiles were full and their hearts a little lighter. Emily stood behind the counter, her hands steady as she handed out pastries, her smile real and unguarded. She watched the faces around her. People who didn't know her past, but who believed in her future. For the first time, she wasn't just existing. She was living. A new chapter. That night, alone in her apartment, Emily opened her notebook one last time. She wrote slowly, savoring each word. "I am not my past. I am the choices I make today. I am strong. I am free. I am becoming." She closed the notebook and looked out the window, the stars scattered across the velvet sky like quiet witnesses. The road had been long and uncertain. But it had led her here, to a place where fear no longer ruled, where hope bloomed in the small moments, and where she was finally learning to trust herself again. Emily smiled softly, the kind of smile that wasn't about forgetting the pain, but about honoring the journey through it.